All right, let's get this show on the road. Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Amy Manzelli. I'm a lawyer from BCM Environmental and Land Law, where I work in New Hampshire and Maine. And my office is based in Concord, New Hampshire. And I've been working with Granite Staters for Responsible Gaming for a couple years. It's been my great pleasure. So I'm just going to get us started tonight. I'm going to review our agenda. I'm going to do some level setting about why we're talking about this. And then I'm going to introduce our two guests for tonight. And then I'm going to hand things over to them to largely talk with us tonight. So by way of introduction, why are we here tonight? Why are we talking about this? And some of you have seen Granite Staters for Responsible Gaming position paper on their website, and I'm going to start with the conclusion of the executive summary there. Uncontrolled expansion of casino-style gaming is not a bell that can be unrung. And that pretty much says it all. But just to get into a little bit of details and sort of flesh that out a little bit, in reality, gaming in New Hampshire is shifting. So what lawmakers envisioned when they allowed charitable gaming in 1949 was more of like what we would all call mom and pop charitable gaming. Maybe the Elks Club was going to hold a little bingo night, something like that, just very small scale, one-off. But it's been changing to these mega casinos, really in the style of Las Vegas style casino gaming. Now, just to give you some numbers from data that the state of New Hampshire collects to put this into reality for you, in 2021, New Hampshire casinos grossed $41 million. Now think about the amount of growth and the pace of growth when I give you this next number. In 2023, New Hampshire casinos grossed more than $170 million. So 2021, 41 million, 2023, 170 million. So that's happening. That growth is happening. That's the reality of the growth of the casino industry in New Hampshire. It's happening fast. New Hampshire laws governing casinos, they just haven't kept up. So Granite Staters for Responsible Gaming feel that now is the time to reassess and rework the regulatory framework that is meant to prevent the adverse consequences that can occur when you have unregulated or under-regulated gaming. So that's why we're here tonight. And so let me introduce our two guests. Jim Monahan is the principal of White Birch Communications. Jim works with BCM Law and Granite Staters for Responsible Gaming to track and monitor developments in the New Hampshire gaming industry. White Birch's primary role is to keep those with concerns about how gaming in New Hampshire is expanding and the need for heightened regulations and local control informed about legislative and regulatory developments. And we're going to hear from Jim first, but I also want to introduce Les Burnell. Les Burnell is the National Director of Stop Predatory Gambling, a national nonprofit with 501c3 exempt status. Stop Predatory Gambling includes individuals and partner groups from all political stripes and has members in all the states. Its mission is to reveal the truth behind commercialized gambling, to advocate for those who have suffered harm, to prevent more victims, and to champion policy reforms that stop predatory gambling. Les has spoken and written extensively about these topics, has testified before Congress and more than 30 state legislatures, has appeared in the media many hundreds of times, including the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, The Economist, and appearances on 60 Minutes, Fox News, CNN, Dr. Phil Show, and National Public Radio. We are honored to have Jim and Les here tonight. Now, before I hand it over to Jim for the legislative update, I just have one housekeeping note for our audience, and I want to review the agenda. So please use the Q&A feature, which should be round about the middle of the bottom of your screen, to submit your questions tonight. Please do not use the chat feature to submit your questions. Submit your questions through Q&A. So here's how our agenda is going to flow tonight. We've just finished our introduction. We're going to give it to Jim to give us about a 15-minute or so legislative update. And then we have about 5 minutes to have questions, your questions about the legislative update. We'll then hand it over to Les to hear his presentation from Stop Predatory Gambling. And again, we'll have about 5 minutes for questions directly related to Les's presentation. And then we'll conclude by opening it up to a general Q&A, anything that hasn't gotten covered yet. And we're going to keep it right on time and wrap up right by 7:30. So with that, Jim, take it away, please.
Great. Thanks, Amy. So before I talk about what the current legislative session looks like, I'm going to touch a minute on what happened in the sessions before this. As Amy observed, the volume of casino-style gambling really seemed to sneak up on the legislature. The legislation that was enacted that allowed for historic horse racing games, which really are very much like slot machines, but we can talk about the differences, exploded. And so the legislature didn't do nothing about that. They did enact legislation last year, which created a moratorium on the issuance of new licenses and pulled together a legislatively created study commission to look at the expansion of charity gaming, historic horse racing. That all sounds great, but as a practical matter, what has happened is the moratorium, as it was interpreted and written, was a moratorium on issuing new licenses and grandfathered any of those facilities that were in the pipeline for licenses. So what we've seen is, 10 or 12 licenses that were in place and operational stayed in place, and then there is a pipeline of several others that will pop up, even under the context of the moratorium, which is supposed to last until 2031. So it's a practical matter. It's created a bit of a monopoly for the existing license holders. The other difference in the way the moratorium is being viewed is it doesn't stop those existing license holders from expanding their facilities, either the footprint or the size of the facilities or the number of historic horse racing machines that they have. The commission that met this summer observed that there was probably a little less than 2,000 of these machines. It's very likely that during the course of the moratorium that could double or triple between now and 2031. So that's where the legislative session began. We're currently tracking about 20 bills. I'm not going to read through all 20 tonight, but instead we'll talk a bit about the categories of things that we're seeing, and then observe a bit about where, as a general matter, they might go if left unchecked. The first bunch of bills deal with potential restrictions or changes on where the profits from historic racing charitable gambling go today. They are generally split. The profits are generally split between the state and the charities, which allegedly hire the casinos to conduct the games for them. And there's probably a half a dozen bills that would either change the way the charities are selected, cap what the charities can receive, or divert some of the funds from the profits to the Education Trust Fund. As a general matter, those bills are not being received with a lot of enthusiasm by the Ways and Means committees, which are looking at them, because they get a lot of pressure from the existing casino operators and from the charities that benefit from it. And because they're theory of a moratorium is in place, they don't want to mess with it. Although they're very likely to enact a new gaming commission, which will look more specifically at this issue of how are the charities selected, how do they participate, and how should the funds be allocated. The gaming commission that I've talked about is going to pop up in a couple of places, but at the end of the day, there will be a new gaming commission. And that has allowed the legislature to take a lot of the things they don't quite understand or are getting filed, and they're just disposing them by saying, well, the commission will look at these. And that's everything from age limits to hours of operation, and some of the mechanical issues around the casinos. Then beyond that, there are probably a couple of bills which offer some improvement on the current situation, which I think stand a reasonably decent shot at passing. And the most important one would be House Bill 247, which is a bill that would provide for the municipalities to have a referendum before they can to allow or not allow casino-style gambling, slot machines, or historic horse racing when it's all written at the end of the day. This is the way the Lottery Commission has always operated in the context of most recently Keno, where if you're going to have Keno in the community, there has to be a vote of the community to allow for it. This bill came very close to passing last year, but fell apart at the end. There seems to be more effort to try to get it passed this year. It will exempt the existing facilities, and it will exempt the facilities that are going to be that are in the process of moving through the licensing stage now. So it's really about how will things operate after the moratorium is lifted in 2021. The most substantial change that we will see proposed as this legislation involves slot machines. The current law does not allow for slot machines. Rather, it allows for historic horse racing machines, which if you went to a casino, they would look just like a slot machine to you, but they do operate differently with a different algorithm and with different payouts, as I understand it. There are two bills that have been filed, one in the House and one in the Senate, which would allow the existing license holders to transform their historic horse racing machines to what the euphemism is video lottery terminals, but it's really slot machines. It is very likely, and we learned this through the study commission that met over the summer, that transformation would happen pretty quick because the overhead for operating the historic horse racing machines is quite high. There's licensing fees and the payouts are different. And I suspect others on this, Les may talk about it, the person using the machine operates differently. So it becomes a more profitable venture for the operators to use video lottery terminals or slot machines. All of this was given a big boost last Thursday when the governor presented her budget, which included an endorsement of the transformation to video slot machines or video terminals, and with an expectation of an additional $117 million in profits flowing to the state. So in some measure, a big part of the governor's budget is, for the time being, predicated on realizing the revenues from enhanced gaming. The governor's proposal also signaled some potential changes in the enforcement and regulation of slot machines by renaming the Lottery Commission to the Lottery and Gaming Commission. And we expect that in the context of that proposal, there will be some enhanced authority and regulatory support for gaming enforcement and regulation. The details of that are not known yet, and they will develop over the course of the next several months as the governor's budget is articulated in legislation. It would be House Bill 2. And that will be a big part of the discussion around slot machines will be in the context